served as the internal evaluator for the advanced grant. It's a part of what I do. I work at the university in multiple roles, and one of those roles is program evaluation. My background is in sociology, and I have a passion for studying inequities, so I enjoy doing evaluation on projects that overlap with my interests. So Advance was an especially fun project for me. It's about 200,000 people. We are in a very rural state, and there are limitations with that. We are in the middle of the country, so there are some things that we cannot change. We cannot add oceans and mountains and anything like that. So there's some limitations, just purely geography. But then also being part of a rural state is basically it limits our opportunities as far as dual career placements, for example. So when we have a dual career situation, we don't have a lot of other, especially other universities or other industry where we can place the partner. So our options are much more limited, so we have to do a lot more in-house and find opportunities within the institution because we just don't have the opportunities in the city. An intern evaluator is the one that's day-to-day involved, and the benefit of being internal is that I am on site. So the accessibility is a lot easier, whereas the external is somebody, at least in our case, who came and checked in on us every so often and was available for guidance. It was a vital role. I strongly recommend people using that model. So I had access to all of our internal data. I had access to people, and so I could collect data. I could be involved in the day-to-day operations, doing a lot of the legwork. However, because I was internal, there are some limitations to that, in that I can be unbiased to a certain extent, and I think people view me that way to a certain extent, but there are limitations. So because I'm internal, it's nice to have somebody who's completely external who can gather additional information from key stakeholders and things that I think I would be a little harder pressed to get. Data, lots and lots of data. I collect data, any kind of data I can get. I'm definitely a big fan of mixed methods, so we use free data that is already available. So we are very fortunate in that we have a wonderful Office of Institutional Research and Planning that is very willing to help us get data, and so they were able to give us just existing institutional data that was helpful. But that only tells part of the story. So then we collected a lot of data as well. So we collected a lot of survey data, we collected a lot of qualitative data, we did interviews, focus groups with different entities, and that evolved over time. We determined what was needed and collected more data. If we found a problem that we didn't know what this really meant, then let's go collect more data to figure it out. So for example, we did a climate survey, and we identified from this that the group that was the least happy were our full associate and primarily full professor women, and we didn't really understand why. So the survey data tells us a lot and tells us how they feel about things, but it doesn't really tell us the why they feel this way and some of the deeper issues. So to follow up with that, we did a focus group with associate faculty and then another focus group with full professor faculty, and we learned a lot more about what are the deeper issues and why is this happening, and helped us understand the situation a lot better. Ultimately, our institutional data, that black and white tells you whether you've had change. Did the proportion of women change? And we did some really cool data visualization things to actually showcase that data that I think were well received. I would almost argue that actually it's not necessarily any specific data collection tool or something we did. Maybe more so the delivery method that we used actually I think is what that I think was the most exciting part of it. So we collected a lot of this data, which was primarily institutional data, and we presented it to our department chairs for the most part. There were other people involved too, but that was the primary target audience, and brought them into a room to have a data discussion. And so we presented them with the data, and we wanted to hear their thoughts, their reactions on what they thought about this data. Now, rather than, I think the default is if you provide just broad level institutional data, everybody's knee-jerk reaction is, well, that doesn't apply to my discipline. That must be something else. So we gave data at their level. So we provided data. The first year, I believe, we presented data that showed their specific department at UNL, and then we gave them a comparison group to show kind of as a comparison. We gave them the national pool of PhDs in that discipline. And they were receptive to that. However, they wanted more, which I thought was a great thing. I love when people ask for more data. And they wanted to know more about their peers specifically and about actual faculty placements, not PhDs coming out of, coming into the pool, but actually who are current faculty. So we set out and we're part of the CIC, which is the academic Big Ten version, and so we worked with the CIC and were able to get that data from most schools within the CIC to find out the proportion of women faculty in each department in all those schools. And then we matched those departments with our departments, and then we gave them that data, and the department chairs loved it. I mean, they loved being able to see how they stack up to their peers. And we like to use competition, I guess, and take advantage of people's competitive spirits, and nobody wants to be well below their peers. So we also gave them comparisons within UNL to other departments within their college. So we showed them, this is what your college looks like as a whole, here's what your department looks like. So you're either above or below kind of your college average. And then the same with the CIC comparison. What I think is probably one of the biggest challenges with evaluating a grant like Advance is that it is a 5-year grant trying to transform an institution. And being able to have data to show that is a big challenge. So you can look at institutional data, but to change the proportion of women faculty in 5 years is a pretty daunting thing to do. It just takes a lot of time. No matter how great your efforts are at recruitment, if you don't have searches happening, you can't add more female faculty. So it's challenging to be able to show impacts when you're dealing with really small ends. We really had a lot of success with our dual career program. And not only success with placements and all that, but also just attitudinal changes, which is something that you can show a little quicker change on. So early in the grant, we surveyed department chairs and search committee chairs, and I would say the norm was to view dual careers as a burden rather than an opportunity, and that it was a challenge to place it. It was more of a headache than a help. And by the end of the grant, that opinion had switched. And so not only had we had success in actually placing them, which we had data to show that, the actual impacts, but we had data that also showed these other things were changing too, and that there was a shift in opinions, and that now department chairs and search chairs view dual career as an opportunity and something that actually helps them in the hiring process. I would say my guidance is to let the data lead you in the direction that you should go and make data-driven decisions. So, for example, the example I provided with our climate data showing that our full professor women were the least satisfied is to then tweak your programming to modify to be able to reach that group. So maybe in your original proposal you hadn't targeted specific activities at that group. But if the data then leads you to that, then be flexible enough to be able to find that. And the same with even we had several strategies that we started with, and some were more successful than others, and be willing to say this didn't work, and that's okay. And whereas another program is really successful, so go with the one that's working and pour more into it, and then try different things for the ones that don't work. So I think that flexibility is key. for being willing to do that. I know that's hard at the proposal stage to say, we're just going to do whatever works, but be able to come up with some good ideas based on the data you have. Everybody should have some data to work from at the proposal stage. So working from that, identify what you think would work. I think we've talked a lot about context, and so definitely think about how context impacts what you can do at your institution. What's the best way to structure it, who to have involved, but definitely have the administration on board with it. I think that fundamentally is a key ingredient.